everybody. Welcome back to More Than You See, where Deborah and I have conversations with creatives about their mental health journeys. Now, a reminder, we are not licensed practitioners or therapists, but hopefully in sharing our own struggles and victories, we can help you feel a little less alone and add some tools to your mental health toolbox.
Hi, Allison. How are you?
I'm good. Hi, Deborah. Hi, Shelley. It's so nice to see you.
I am so stoked to have you on the podcast. I just jumped past your bio or your intro or anything just because I really wanted to jump you in here. But Allison, for everyone who is watching on YouTube or anyone who is listening in their ears, you are probably my favorite author. Definitely of the last 5 years. I am blown away with your prose and your descriptions and your characters, and I just want to live inside your books. So I'm really, really honored to have you here. And if you want to learn more about Allison, I'm going to put her entire bio in the show notes. But The People We Keep is one of the books that I jumped into first of yours. And most recently, you have this one right here that's behind me, Home of the American Circus. And I just want to start off by saying that, we interview a lot of creatives on here, a lot of actors, and you have a theater background. And so I would love to hear how your theater led you into writing.
Yeah, so I was undiagnosed as having attention deficit disorder when I was younger. And I did terribly in high school. I almost failed high school English. My sophomore English teacher hated me. I was really inconsistent. I was the does not apply herself kid. And then I'd be interested in something and I'd get an A, and sometimes I'd get accused of cheating because they didn't think I was smart enough. And but I went to art camp as a kid and we did plays. And I was a really shy kid, but the deal was if you wanted to go to art camp, you had to be in the play. And eventually, over the years, I got more confident with that, and I knew how to do that, and I knew theater was something you could do. I sort of had it in my head that I wanted to be in little art films or something. It wasn't I wanted to be a big star. I wanted to do the quiet work. I really liked Merchant Ivory films as a kid, and smaller indies and things like that. And so I went to school for theater, but I was the quietest theater major on the planet because I really don't want you to look at me, which is very hard to be a theater major. So I went for 2 years and I got diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. And, both of you are actors and it's your passion. I was doing it because it was something I could do, and it was close. It was so close to what I do now that is my passion, but it wasn't my passion. And it was very weird to be in school with people and see how driven they were and how that's different from just liking something. And so when I finally got diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, thanks to my advisor at Ithaca, who sent me to academic support services, and I just didn't know who I was anymore. Everything about myself was based on thinking I wasn't very bright, that, I couldn't trust myself, that I wasn't consistent, that I didn't show up the ways that I wanted to, and I didn't know why. And so I just didn't know who I was. So I dropped out of school for 2 years and I worked at a biker bar, and I really got thrown around by life a lot. And I'm not thankful for that, but I am thankful for the texture that I gained and the palette that I built to write with, because you definitely see that part of my life in my writing. But it wasn't until my whole entire life fell apart. I was in a really abusive relationship. I had appendicitis and had to have my appendix removed, which is actually how Home of the American Circus starts, even though it is fiction. I put that in there. And that actually sent me back to college. And in college, I was so determined to not do anything creative. I was going to go to school for public relations. And then I took a writing class. I took a script writing class. I was like, well, I mean, people in PR have to write scripts for things, so I should take that class. And then I took an essay writing class, and my professor was like, "You're kind of good at this writing thing." And I was like, "Shut up." Because I do have ADHD, so that was my impulsive reaction.
Right.
And then I started taking creative writing, and I ended up doing like an interdisciplinary studies major so I could write. And I actually wrote the short story that became my first novel, Stay. I wrote 3 novels as Allie Larkin. And then I've written 2 as Allison Larkin that are a little more serious, like just a little grittier, I think. But I think that being a theater major is actually what I've used the most in my writing, because in my acting classes, we did all that really deep character study and having to understand everything about our characters, even when it wasn't on the page. And I think some of my favorite people still come from that experience. I went to Ithaca College for 2 years, which, in the people we keep, Ithaca is kind of like the greatest place in the entire world, which I still feel like it is.
Yeah.
And, I have some friends who I still go to for feedback on my work who are actors, because I think that actors give the best character advice. And so I'm really thankful for the roundabout way that all of this happened.
Yeah, I heard you speak. I'm going to jump around a little bit here, but I heard you talk on another podcast about that dopamine hit from the ADD and like the dopamine hit that allows you to focus on things. And I would love for you to talk about that, because I think that like we go through, I mean, our brains are constantly changing, they constantly change until we're 25. But then I feel like we are changing, so much beyond that. Like our brains are constantly evolving. And so to be living in a body where you're like, I understand how my brain thinks this way. And then to come to this realization where you're like, oh, wait a second, that's actually not how my brain thinks. And like, if I give it this other thing, that's actually what's going to help it perform. I think like doing that kind of self-reflection and research is so valuable and has clearly led to your success in so many ways. And so I'd love to hear about that journey for you.
It's been like a repeated journey too. I joke that in my later, like my mid-20s, I'd forgotten that I had ADHD. I was really beating myself up for all the things in my life that I wasn't doing. And when I went to, I wrote about it, I think, like years ago. I don't think it's online anywhere anymore, but I'd bought a package of underwear at Target, and it sat in my living room for like a month. And I had to take them out of the package and take all the tags or stickers or whatever off of them and put them in the wash. And I just like couldn't do it. And I went to my doctor, and she was like, but you have ADHD. Like you actually can't do it right now. Like you do not have the things in your brain that you need to do this right now. So you're beating yourself up and it's not getting you anywhere. And so like, I kind of had to remember that I have ADHD and I have to be careful with myself, and I have to kind of think about the fuel I put in my car so that I can drive, And so it's been that discovery again and again and again. Like when The People We Keep was coming out, we moved into the house that we live in now, and we're still moving into that house because I have had so many cycles of book things, like writing a book, putting a book out, writing a book, and it's been really hard to kind of ground and fix things in the house to like really settle in. And I think that I kind of had to go through remembering that I have ADHD all over again and figuring out what that means. And like you said, over your life, like our brains change. I'm 48 now, so I'm like heading into perimenopause, and that's a whole new experience too. And so you just have to keep figuring out who you are and what you need, which I think is actually really helpful in the creative process, because I think that every creative project might need something a little bit different. And remembering that you have to discover that over and over and over again, that it's not like I get up at 7 and I sit at my desk and I drink this coffee and I write for 4 hours and that's the magic for me. It's not always the magic. That might work for a week and then the next week it doesn't work. Or maybe the next project you need to dictate into your phone as much as possible, or whatever it is. With Home of the American Circus, I put butcher paper on our walls in our old house that we were renting and drew the story out in crayon because that's what I needed to do. And then I had that on my walls in my office for years while I thought about those characters and finished The People We Keep and wrote Swimming for Sunlight. And, and when it came time to actually work on that project specifically, I had to figure out what that project needed as a sole focus and what I needed to do to write it. And my emotions with that project, because Home of the American Circus takes place in my hometown. And the fear that I had about writing that was its own thing to get over. So I feel like because I've had to continually learn how to work with my ADHD, I've also learned how to work with myself as a creative person and just realize that, I don't know, there's a Lemonheads song called Hannah and Gabby where Evan Dando sings, "I can't wake up every day and find the same me." And I feel like that, I don't know what machinery I'm going to wake up with in the morning. And that's part of having ADHD and that's part of being a creative person. And so I always have to assess, like, who am I today? How can I be the most productive with what I'm waking up with how I feel, with how my body feels? There's also a lot of crossover between ADHD and chronic illness. And so I have like mast cell activation syndromes. I have a lot of allergic reactions and that can flare and things like that. So it's just always figuring out how I can best be myself any given day.
I like you saying about waking up in the morning and like being your best self with like what you have that day. I felt like stress and then immediate like relief, because that is so powerful to think about. And I think that I know I'll speak for myself. Every day I'm like, okay, I'm going to like be the best mom and I'm going to be the best actor. I'm going to be the best producer. I'm going to be the best business owner and I'm going to be the best podcaster. And I'm going to do all of these things in the time that's been designated for them. And when things start to bleed into each other and my schedule starts to fall apart, it is really hard for me to like maintain not my calm. I'm actually a very like calm external person, but inner turmoil, the like stress that builds.
It's a terrible thing to wake up in the morning and have all these goals for yourself and get to the end of the day and feel like it all got away from you. And I mean, I'm still working on it. It's not like I've perfected this in any way, shape, or form, but I'm trying to say like, okay, I don't have writing energy today, but I have research to do. So I'm going to listen to an audiobook about my research and go work in the yard. Or I really don't feel well today. I'm going to sit and watch a bunch of documentaries related to my work. Or I'm going to just answer emails today. Or, like I try. And I mean, it's a privilege to be able to do that, to have the flexibility to be able to do that. But I think that, if I were to get up every day and try to write a certain amount of words, I'd just waste my time, Like I've tried that before and it does just waste my time. But when I work with the energy I have in the moment that I have, I'm always happier at the end of the day because I did something instead of being in that like functional freeze of like, I know I need to do this thing and I don't quite have it in me. And then you sit there and like kind of try to work up the nerve, but like the stress about working up the nerve keeps you from actually getting the energy to do the thing. So
it's so interesting to hear you talk about it in a writing perspective, because a lot of the people we talk with on the podcast are similar to us. They're either in front of the camera, they're more, on the performance side of things. And so we can all relate to how it feels of like, I just don't have the energy today to put toward the scene, or like you're saying, use the energy you have to feed through your performance. And so to hear it on a writing perspective of like, it's not about a word count every day. It's about what can I do that still informs me as a writer, whether it's research I can do, something that inspires me today. That's not just, like Deborah's saying, beating over the head with all the pressure that we can wake up and ticking off responsibilities on the to-do list. And so, yeah, thank you for sharing that and in your perspective. I'm curious because you have 5 books, correct?
Yes.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I, as an actor, we go through the cycle, the wash, rinse, repeat cycle of, audition, maybe a callback, booking a job, doing the project, getting through the job finishes. Now we're right back to the start of the cycle. And so I'm curious if you'll talk about, as a writer, when you're in a new book, especially since you have 5, of what that cycle presents itself like as a writer, where it's like, does the inspiration hit first? Does an idea hit? Do you get an itch that you just need to start writing? Where does it all start for you?
It does kind of start with an itch. It sort of starts with what happens when my first novel started with a writing exercise in class, and then it turned into a short story, and then it turned into a novel. But at the same time that I was working on that, I was working on pages for my writing group, and I was listening to a playlist, and these 2 songs played, and all of a sudden I was picturing this girl with a guitar, and I wrote 5,000 words or 6, I can't remember the number anymore, but an amazing amount of words about April from The People We Keep without understanding what I was doing yet. And I wasn't sure, maybe that would be my first book, I wasn't really sure. And it took me 15 years to get that book published. Because everybody wanted it to be something different than what it was. And I was getting all this bad feedback. And I kind of ended up just sticking to my guns on it. But it took me 15 years to get somebody else on board to publish it. And then it became, my breakout book, which was really exciting. But in that time, in those 15 years, I also had other sparks of, what would happen if this happened? Or, if this character... At one point, I was doing a writing exercise at home, and I just was trying to think of what would be a really compelling starting sentence. And I came up with, my husband brought a date to our divorce. And that turned into Swimming for Sunlight. And it just kind of came from that line, because that happened, and I was like, okay, who was this person? And then I started thinking about okay, what does she want to keep in the divorce? And I thought her dog. And so it ended up being this story about this woman who gives up everything in her divorce to keep custody of her dog, and has to move in with her grandmother, who was a roadside attraction mermaid in her youth. And so there's this whole mermaid reunion story happening, which all came from just, okay, what would be a really compelling first line? So there's been a lot of those moments of just... of having these sparks, having these stories that have been with me for a very long time before they ever turn into my full-time focus. And the wash, rinse, repeat for me has been that I don't fit into the industry very easily. After my first book had a dog in it, then all anybody wanted from me was dog books. And I had this book about a folk singer, and so nobody really wanted that. And then they wanted to try to get me to turn that into a dog book. And I was like, that doesn't work. I'm not interested in that. So I've had 5 agents. I've been with 3 or 4 different publishers now. It's every single time I write a book, I kind of feel like I have to reinvent the wheel to figure out the business side of things, just because I don't think that, my first agent saw me as a certain kind of writer, and then The People We Keep and Home of the American Circus doesn't fit that. And that's not to say that I always want to write books like The People We Keep and Home of the American Circus. My next one will fit into that, but I don't know about the next one. I think that, probably with acting too, it's very easy to get pigeonholed. And the battle is hard to get out of that.
But you were saying before, where you were people want it to be this book and it's not this thing. And that's definitely something that we experience as actors, but I definitely experience that as a producer and as a writer, as a screenwriter, where people, I remember I sent one of my scripts to someone once who's a VP of a very big production company. So she has excellent notes. And I sent her the script, and she said, she basically was like, this character needs to be the exact opposite of what she is. And I was like, but that's not the story I'm telling. Yeah. And so I'm just curious, how do you stick to your guns with that? Because that's so admirable.
I think part of it is a neurodivergence thing, but I think part of it is that I tried to give people what they wanted. The people we keep, at one point, one of my agents wanted me to turn it into like a rom-com where April ends up with the dopey coffee guy at the end, and all, it's pretty much the same book, and then that happens at the end, and it's like, ew, why would that be a happy ending? That's not happy. Like, what? No, that's not the book. Some of the feedback that one of my agents had gotten for me from an editor was like, this is a book about a traveling folk singer who's a teenager. She steals a car and hits the road. And some of the feedback I got from an editor who was considering buying the book was, what if she stays in one place and has friends her own age? And it was the same thing as you're saying, like, that's not the book. That's fine. That's somebody else's book, but that's not my book. And so, like, when I did write a rom-com version of that book, and it was absolutely horrible. And of course it couldn't sell. And thank goodness it couldn't sell, because that would have destroyed what ended up being the book that it is. But I think what I realized in all of that is that other people don't have the answers about your creative work. And I think we kind of want them to. And we want to be, like, I wanted to be able to fit in the box. I wanted to be able to have that career of, like, I have a new book out every 2 years, like clockwork. And, I always know what my life's going to look like. And it's always going to be that easy. But I am fundamentally a square peg, and I want to write books for square pegs. And I want, and I think that just realizing that the people on the business side of things have business minds. They don't have neurodivergent, messy, creative minds. And so they're not going to have the answers that I'm looking for about my work in the ways that I wanted them to. So it was a lot of trial and error and pain and almost quitting all of it. And really what ended up happening was I fired my fourth agent, I think, scraped all of their notes out of my book and took it back. And I was like, I'm just going to write it for me. I don't know if I'll ever publish it. I don't know if I'm ever going to do anything with it. I just, for my soul, I need to put it right in my head. And I put things back the way that I wanted them to be. And that's the book that sold. Which could have not happened too. Like you say that as like that arc of like, and then everything was happy. And it's like, it's lucky that it did. That's the lucky part.
Right.
That's a beautiful point too of, like you said, going back and doing it the way you wanted it to be done, the way you felt in your heart and soul that it was meant to be written and presented. That how many times we can get caught in those traps of just trying to feed the system or feed someone else's idea of what it should be, or idea of success, or idea of how it could make money, when you just go back to the truth and the heart of what you are putting into your work or your story or your project. That's the propelling launch. And it's so interesting, just as, even as a collaborative team and people that can, really be trying to even emphasize the same goal, how that can just go awry when not ever, there's no way for people to understand what's going on inside of your own being. Yeah. You're like, it's like this, and I know you're trying to be helpful, but you're steering it completely off course.
Yes. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, and one of the things that I realized is that you have to, as much as everybody has this idea of like working, that you can sort of half form something and then bring it to the other parts of your creative team. That's not actually how it works. You have, because other people who aren't writers have a very hard time filling in the blanks of what you're aspiring to. And so bringing forth the most fully actualized version of what you're doing is the most important thing you can do in the process. And so I have, actor friends, I have reader friends, and I have writer friends who read my books and give me feedback. And we swap manuscripts. And that's really, really helpful because another writer understands, it would be like somebody who's never auditioned telling you how to walk in an audition. They might get the overall spread of something, but they're not going to understand, like, well, you're going to feel a little bit like this when they say that, but don't show it on your face. Because, they're not going to be able to understand, like, how it feels for you to go into the audition, whereas another actor will understand how it feels. And that's the same thing with writing. It's like another writer knows, well, if you have to move this point here 3 pages down, it's going to affect the trajectory of the rest of your book. They understand the cause and effect of the tiniest little things. And so I think the best feedback I get is from other writers. And I take it to heart. It's not like I'm here saying, oh, I don't want anyone to ever say anything about my work. It's just that I think that my work is precious. Everyone says don't be precious about your work, but this is what I'm doing with my life. So I don't really have a choice except to do it the way that I want to do it.
Well, I think that for actors and for people in general in the world, I think that we're getting really bad at listening to each other and at going on journeys, being led by someone else on a journey. And so I think that that's part of the problem with bad, quote unquote, bad feedback. And honestly, to loop in our last episode, this is the issue with AI, where it's people are putting, they're siloing themselves about this is exactly the answer that I want to get back. This is exactly the journey that I want to go on, instead of opening a book and being where is this author taking me? Where and I think that good actors are able to still go on that journey and react to your scene partner, react to the lines that are written and go, okay, how am I going to take this and add myself to it, but still remain within the confines of the structured story that you're being presented with. And I want to jump into your writing a little bit because, we've kind of been skating around it, but I think that like I said, you're one of my favorite authors. And the reason is because your descriptive language is so rich. And I mean, your description of the appendicitis operation in the beginning of Home of American Circus, number one, I had an emergency C-section and I was like, this feels exactly like my C-section scar. And Shelley, you should read this, but it's just the way that you describe her moving and just doing tiny little things and how that was just ripping open her insides, the day after the surgery. And it was one of those things where I had a visceral reaction in my body. And I've never had appendicitis. I still have my appendix, but just because I was able to relate to your descriptive language and bring it into my own experience, it was incredible. And obviously that was something that you've actually experienced, like you shared earlier in the podcast. But there's a lot of stuff in your books that I'm sure you have not experienced. And there's a lot of addiction cycling and difficult relationships and levels of abuse. And there's so much in there that I feel like an actor, when we step into a character and we take on someone's varying levels of good, bad, and ugly, all of the things that we put on ourselves, and then have to take that off and go and be out in the world. You're doing that too as a writer, and I'm curious how that affects you, and if you have any kind of routine or something that you do in order to dive into the characters and then step out of them.
I'm not very good at stepping out of them. It is something I really struggle with, and it is something I really think about a lot in terms of what it does to my mental health to kind of go to these places all the time. Except that, when I finished the first draft of The People We Keep, I felt lighter. I felt like I'd worked, it was like a fever breaking almost, and so I knew going into Home of the American Circus that I would also feel that way at the end, but in the process of it, it was really hard to write. And I think it kind of helped me work through some things, even though it's fiction, it kind of helped me work through some things that I needed to work through. Um, and and take some things, like some feelings and some textures in my life, and apply them to something meaningful. I think there's something really healing in that. It makes it feel like the things I went through in my life were for something, even if it's not that directly. So, there is a healing process built into it, but I have a really hard time being a writer and being a person at the same time. Like, I have a really hard time, especially in certain points in a draft where I just kind of can't really take a phone call. Like, I can't really chat with a friend. I can't really show up the way that I want to for things because my brain's just not in the right place, and part of me wishes I could be better at separating the two, and part of me feels like that's what it takes. And I'm not sure what the answer is on that.
How does that affect your personal relationship? Like, do you and your husband have a word? Are you just like very vocal with him where you're like, hey, I can't today? Or how do you navigate that?
Yeah, I mean, he has come home and I've been crying, and he's like, is this about a real person? And I'm like, no. No, everything's fine.
Yeah.
My imaginary person's spouse just passed away, but, it's okay. So there is that. I think he's, he also has a lot of his own interests, and I think that that's really helpful too, that like he's super into rock climbing and photography and, his job and everything. So I think that it's really helpful that a lot of the time he will go on like a long backpacking trip or a long rock climbing trip. And that's when I will not talk to anybody for 2 weeks and just work really hard and then kind of be over it when he gets back, which is really helpful. And if I can get like 2 of those in a book, I'm good, And then there's a couple weeks that are kind of like finals week, where you're going through the manuscript again and again and again. And that's really a lot. And you just get through it, but it is hard. It's been hard with some friends, especially friends who really want to help. Like, oh, well, what if you have to eat, right? What if I just come and bring you some breakfast and we sit on your step? And it's like, no, I can't. I'm so sorry. Like, I can't do that and then stay in my world, And so that's been kind of hard. I think the people who are in my life understand that now, but that's been a hard thing especially before I was really comfortable with that. I think I spent a lot of my time not giving credit to what I needed to do to make my art because I felt like it was too prissy, or like I should be able to hack it, or I should be able to handle this, or whatever it was. And that's just not, I need what I need.
For sure. It reminds me of like the postpartum experience where, having Beckett's almost 1. So that's wild. But definitely having gone through it, I now very much know what other people need during that time. And so I have a friend who's about 3 weeks postpartum right now. And, she very much like going into birth was like, I'm going to have my family. And then like, as soon as the family leaves, like, I'd love to see you. I'd love for you to come over, whatever. And I was like, you let me know, whatever. And now it's like 3 weeks. I haven't met the baby yet. And all I do is like every couple days is I just message her and I'm like, I'm thinking about you, just checking in. And sometimes she responds, sometimes she doesn't. And I still haven't met the baby. And what I've done a few times, because I am very much respecting that she doesn't necessarily want to come outside and talk to me, is I'll like literally drop on her door like coffee for her and her husband. Like, I know their coffee order. I'll leave it on their door, and I'll text them after I'm already 2 blocks away and be like, I left coffee on your door, because I just know that, like, if they wanted to see me, they would invite me in.
Yeah.
And right now they don't have the space for that. And I think that not to put my feelings on you, but I feel like it's similar, where it's just like, I'm in this bubble and I need to control everything that I can, and I can't have any outside influence like in my brain.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because the way that you're saying that you understand what your friend is going through, so you're being really protective of her. Like, it's so hard to do that for ourselves and feel entitled to it. And it's so much easier to do it for other people. And that's something I've been trying to do lately, is think like, what would I expect of someone in my situation, for a number of reasons. For, like, what would I expect this, knowing what I'm going through right now, would I expect this of a friend going through the same thing? And then I try to let myself off the hook.
Similarly, in the way that you were describing, getting obsessive and really being engulfed in your world when you're writing, what is the experience when you have finished your book and when you have put the story away? Is there like a grieving process to that, or are you able to more easily put it to rest? How does that manifest for you?
It is such a grief process. And I listened to the episode where you were talking about acting and like finishing a project, and I just felt for you so much, because that is so much of what you go through finishing, or what I go through finishing a book, is like my whole world was wrapped up in these imaginary people who I will never get to meet in person. I will never really be intertwined with them the same way again. And, I can think about them all I want, but it won't be the same thing. And there's something so sad about being done. I actually really hate finishing books. I really hate it. I think all of them I would have written forever if I could have,
Yeah, so, when do you decide that they're done?
Sometimes I have a deadline, and sometimes I start to realize that I'm just changing things back and forth. I've gotten to the point where I'm just like, well, maybe if I move this scene here, or maybe if I move it here. Or sometimes I will be reading through the book and I'll be like, oh, this needs this sentence. And then like 3 paragraphs later, that sentence is there verbatim. And it's like, I already did that. And that's kind of the sign of like, okay, it's time to move on here. Like, you're not making it better at this point. You've said everything that you could possibly say, and it's just time to be done. But that's a hard place to get to.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about armor and masks. That's a question I actually used to ask like early on in the podcast. I used to ask like, what masks are you currently wearing? And like, what's a mask that you've like taken off of yourself? And I think with identity that's constantly changing in our lives, and with, you mentioned on another podcast about armor that you wear, and like how you interact with people, and then the ability to take armor off. So I'm just curious, like, what armor do you currently wear, and does it change when you're writing versus when you're interacting with people in the world, when you're at home, when you're with your dogs? Like, how does that morph for you?
I think I wear a lot less armor than I used to, because I am comfortable being a really vulnerable person. And I think when armor was an even bigger deal for me, I was trying to act like a neurotypical person. I was trying to appear like a conventional person. You know what I mean? Like, I live an unconventional life. I don't have a normal career. I don't have, a normal schedule. I have to be really self-motivated in ways that are weird. I hurt my own feelings for a living. It's strange. And then I'd still try to show up in the world like I have this very buttoned-down life that I don't have. And so I'm letting myself off the hook for that more. So it requires a lot less. I'm a lot less apologetic for who I am at this point in my life, which some of it is probably like hormonal and age and also, I think all of us have just, as women, been pushed to our limits. And so, like, I am not here to make other people more comfortable anymore. But, I think what you were talking about, I think some of it is just related to being like totally engulfed in a scene and then having to like call my insurance agent or talk to my tax accountant. Like I that takes too much to pull myself together, because there's times where you can't just be like all over the place. You have to pull it together and fit the mold and give them the answers that they want. You can't be like creative in your spreadsheets for your taxes. So, those have to be like different gears in life for me. I can't, like I've extended my taxes when I need to because I'm busy working on a project, because I can't do a little bit every day and also work on my book. It's just things like that. Yeah. And I think the thing I was saying about armor is that years ago, and she does not remember saying it, I don't think, I was talking with Rainbow Rowell about that. And she said that, with writing, it feels like you have to take off all this armor and it's very, very heavy, like to write. And then you have to decide if you're going to put all the armor back on to go out into the world, or if you're going to go out into the world armorless. And, because the putting on and taking off is so hard. And so like, it's this process, which I just thought was so beautiful. And it really changed the way I look at things. And I think now I go out into the world armorless a lot more because it's a lot easier for me to defend myself and take care of myself.
I think you're a very brave soul.
Oh my goodness, thank you.
I just because you are so true to yourself. I remember this on your social media, that there was a reader of yours who reached out to you and said something preposterous like, oh, the character shouldn't have done this. Or I'm curious if you want to tell that story, because it was such a, in the world where we have trolls and all of these people who always have opinions about the art that we're creating. And I think you are so good at just sticking to who you are. And I'm sure it's taken a long time to like figure that out, but like sticking to who you are and being like, no, this is who I am and these are the characters, and take it or leave it.
Yeah, it's taken me such a long time with that. I remember when my first book came out, I got a lot of, young lady, you're obviously very intelligent, but how could you use such language? I got a lot of those emails, and I felt so much shame for them, which is so ridiculous, because I was like using obscenities in women's fiction as like a feminist experiment. You know what I mean? Like I was not even an experiment, as like a feminist statement,
Also, how old were you at that point?
I was like 27, 28, 30, something like that. Yeah. So it was like this weird thing of like being scolded by older people. And I felt like this weird shame about it. And, the thing is though, for every bit, and I have to thank my readers for the tough skin that I've built over that. It's not even really tough skin. It's just kind of like, okay, I'm not for you, because for every book, for every review of somebody who didn't get what I was doing, I've gotten so many more emails or messages or reviews of somebody who said, like, I really needed this. Like, this book meant a lot to me at this point in my life. And you can't decide how many people are going to get what you're doing. But if what you're doing is true to, if you're writing the book that you needed to write, somebody else definitely needed to read it. And that might be 5 people, and that might be 100,000 people or 200,000 people or whatever. Like, we don't know that when we write our work. Like, we don't know, but that doesn't make our work any less valid. And I think, it's always nerve-wracking to put a book out, and the first time somebody says to me, I really needed this, and I'm like, okay, I did it. I did what I needed to do. That's really all I can do, And there's so many people who don't get things. And every once in a while, I don't know if you were talking about, somebody said that I wrote appendicitis wrong. I don't know if that's what you were.
I don't remember. This was like months ago.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, there's so many times where people have, every once in a while, one of them, I get like a bee in my bonnet, but somebody was like, I'm a nurse. And I know she was being so overly dramatic about the appendicitis, and a review that I happened to see that I shouldn't have even looked at. And it was like, yeah, well, I don't have an appendix.
Right.
So I actually have a better perspective on this than you do.
Right.
Which, and that's the thing. It's like, you realize even in that situation that everybody has their own perspective on things, and some people don't want to listen to yours, and
right.
that's okay. I mean, there's tons of art I don't like too,
Yeah.
but there's tons of stuff. I mean, oh my gosh, when you find a movie that, like, I've noticed a lot of movies that are directed by women have like 5 stars on IMDb, and then I'll watch them and they'll be like the best thing I've ever seen. How magical is that? How incredible is that when somebody said something that you felt and you've never seen it portrayed in art before? That's such a magical feeling, and sure, there's 20 people who aren't going to get that, but like, man, I love it when I do. I love it when I get that, when I get somebody else's art.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Allison. This has
absolutely
been such a pleasure. I don't know, Shelley, if you have any final thoughts or questions.
I was so engulfed and just listening to just your journey and how your brain works and how you're able to make it through, the projects and the things you go through. So thank you so much for sharing with us today. And I didn't have too much to jump in on. It was just so nice to get to be here for the conversation.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I really love your show. I think you're doing such a great thing by talking about mental health in relation to art, because I think nobody really talks about that, and how much it takes from us to fight the business and also fight all the doubts that we have and exist in the world and be artists and people at the same time. And so I think you're doing something really important for your listeners, and I'm one of them. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Allison.
Oh, man. I'm curious because this was like newly introduced guest for you. You hadn't been introduced to her work before. So I'm curious what was most impactful for you on this conversation.
It's interesting to listen to her talk about how her ADD informs her lack of focus and her focus. Someone who obviously knows the throes of OCD. It's interesting to hear her get like obsessively involved with her characters and her story and how she, isn't eating or isn't, her partner is wondering why she's emotional. And so it was fascinating to just hear her journey of how her art comes to life in the process, because obviously that's such a subjective process for everybody. We all have our own isms and things when it comes to being in our work or artistic endeavors. So it was, quite interesting to hear that process for her, and even that same grief and depletion process when you're done with it. And it's just interesting just how the through line of it all for everyone, especially in the creative sphere.
For me, it was just I just needed this reminder of the fact that we every day wake up with the capacity for only so much, and that capacity may change, and our ability to tackle different things changes. And I think that it's something that we've worked with my dog, both dogs, my past dog and my current dog, that they've reminded us with the trainers have reminded us that dogs are wake up every day with a limited number of spoons, and when things start to happen to them where they become stressed, they become reactive because the postman was there or whatever, that these spoons are taken away from them, and then once they have no more spoons, they have no more fucks to give, and they just become they have no filter anymore, basically. And it was such a good reminder that we can't accomplish everything every day, and that every day our capacity to accomplish things changes. And I just think that like I said, am constantly trying to do so many things, and I constantly feel like a job that I would love to have in the future is to be a showrunner. Like, I think I would be an excellent showrunner. Yeah. And yet I don't need to be a showrunner of my life right now. Like, I already know that I could do that job and that I could manage creative and business and, you know, manage a bunch of different people under me at all times. And yet, I feel like a lot of times I wake up and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna, like, whatever, crush my day, like, whatever bullshit goes off in my head. And that's just so unfair to myself and to my family. Yeah. And so that was just a really wonderful reminder for myself. But yeah, thank you everyone for listening, and definitely reach out to Allison. She's wonderful on Instagram. I mean, truly, her books are incredible, so I strongly recommend that you check them out.
Yes.
Shelley, take us home.
Absolutely. Be sure to comment. Let us know how you enjoyed the episode, if you've read any of Allison's books or you're going to get them. And we just want to know what inspired you and what may have been relatable to you in terms of the creative process or your own mental health journey. So connect with us on Instagram and TikTok at More Than You See. Don't forget, we've got past episodes and past seasons that are all logged on wherever you listen to your podcast. So give us a listen if you're interested. And if you want to watch us on the video version, we're right here on YouTube. And all the links are going to be posted in the show description. So like and subscribe for all the latest updates from us. We will see you on the next episode of More Than You See.
Thank you so much for being here. Please remember that you and everyone around you is more than you see. Please be kind to yourself, and we will see you very soon.